Imagine your lovely wife joining a book club, but it involves no books, a secret society, and cheating, and it gets worse. Lies, betrayal, and brutal cheating. If any of these words stir something within you, then be sure to strap in for an extraordinary cheating revenge story. But don't worry, the ending will be worth it. Let's start. Jennifer and I. We were the epitome of the classic high school sweethearts. Our story began after a cheesy school dance that everyone attended, more out of obligation than genuine interest. Little did I know that night would mark the beginning of a 9-year journey with the love of my life. We were the couple everyone envied, but beneath the surface, our dreams couldn't have been more different. While I aimed to bury my nose in books, pursue a career in law, and become an attorney, Jennifer had Hollywood dreams. The glitz and glamour of acting lured her, and she aspired to make a name for herself on the big screen. As supportive as I tried to be, I couldn't deny the undercurrent of nervousness that ran through me when I thought about how we would make it work. I was knee-deep in law books, while Jennifer was auditioning all over the country. The dynamics became even more complicated when I graduated a year before her. It was a quirk of fate that despite her being 2 years older, she was a grade below me. The mystery behind that detail remained unsolved. Every time I asked, she'd deflect, and any pursuit of answers led to defensiveness. Looking back, understanding the truth might have changed the course of our story. Post-high school, I shipped off to law school out of state, and we embarked on the challenging journey of a long-distance relationship. I could already hear the skeptics warning me about the perils of such an arrangement, but I was determined to give it a shot. We chatted every night, and I made it a point to visit for holidays and special occasions. Sure, there were times when she couldn't chat for one reason or another, but I didn't read too much into it. Then came the bombshell. After finishing high school, Jennifer dropped the news that she wanted to study acting in Europe. Long distance within the same country was one thing, but an entire ocean between us? It had me seriously worried. Despite my concerns, she reassured me with promises of endless phone calls and nightly chats. Time flew by with her in Europe, diligently pursuing her dreams of studying acting. As time flew by with Jennifer in Europe pursuing her acting dreams and me back home buried in law textbooks, our lives took different but parallel paths. I met a plethora of interesting people, including some women, but I kept things friendly. I had exams to ace in law school and a bar exam to prepare for, so my focus remained on my academic and professional goals. Fast forward a few years, I graduated from law school, aced the bar exam, and landed a job at a meat-sized law firm handling corporate contracts. It wasn't the most thrilling ride, but it paid the bills. Meanwhile, Jennifer was back in the States auditioning fervently, though success seemed elusive. We decided to officially tie the knot, even though we had been together for years. Life continued. I climbed the ranks at the law firm, securing a stable income, while Jennifer scored a few minor acting roles. We traded our tiny apartment for a house in Virginia, the price tag hefty but manageable with my stable job and good credit, enabling us to secure a mortgage. Then it happened. The CEO of my firm got entangled in an embezzling scandal, and the entire firm went belly up. Suddenly, my job evaporated. We had accrued some debt, and the threat of being kicked out of our new house loomed large if we couldn't make the mortgage payments. When I broke the news to Jennifer, we had a good cry together and then began brainstorming ways to stay afloat. As our mortgage deadline loomed, desperation set in, and we explored various options like selling our belongings or Jennifer taking up a part-time job flipping burgers. However, these plans felt like mere band-aids on a sinking ship, insufficient to stave off financial doom. Just days before facing the impending crisis, Jennifer dropped bombshell news. She had landed a significant TV contract. The details were shrouded in secrecy, and it struck me as a bit fishy. However, desperate times call for desperate measures, and with the mortgage deadline closing in, we had little room for skepticism. Her paycheck, undisclosed as it was, proved enough to cover our mortgage, and life seemed to be back on track. I found a new job at a smaller law firm focused on public advocacy, a shift from corporate work. While the pay was less, it felt gratifying to help regular folks. Our worries about losing our home dissipated, and I was on cloud nine. Little did I know that beneath the surface, our marriage was starting to sour. Half a year passed, and we were worry-free. Nightmares about losing our home were replaced by the security of Jennifer's growing acting career. The paychecks increased year by year, but she remained tight-lipped about the details. I started to sense something amiss, wanting to know more about her gigs, especially since they were the financial backbone for our mortgage. However, I brushed off my suspicions, convincing myself it was just paranoia, and decided to let it slide. After all, I had a new job and personal development endeavors on my plate. In the realm of personal development, I embraced a new diet and committed to hitting the gym thrice a week. Jennifer, too, was putting in effort, dressing up and applying makeup before heading out. As we strived for personal growth, little did we know that the unraveling of our story was just on the horizon, and the sin of yesterday's fish in our marriage was becoming harder to ignore. The lack of intimacy and dwindling date nights with Jennifer left me baffled, especially considering her glamorous appearance. While TV actors often maintained high standards, the real show she was putting on remained hidden from my eyes. The plot thickened when one day, an anonymous individual decided to unravel her secret. I found a plain white envelope at work with my name on it, bearing the words "read right away." Inside were pictures of Jennifer in a setting that resembled a strip club, engaged in activities that left me speechless. At first, I clung to the hope that it was a mistake, a prank that I could laugh about later. The photos weren't crystal clear, leaving room for doubt, but no one came forward to dismiss my concerns. Worries gnawed at me, and I knew I had to dig deeper. With some cash from pro bono work stashed away, I hired a private investigator. I couldn't afford the time or stomach for sneaking around strip clubs, and if my suspicions were unfounded, I didn't want to subject my wife to unnecessary distress. The investigator was thorough, tracing the origin of the photos and presenting me with a report along with high-resolution pictures that confirmed my worst fears. In black and white, there it was Jennifer, my sweetheart of 9 years, playing the lead role at a high-end swingers club. My heart sank, and pressure built up in my throat. The shock of the revelation hit me like a bucket of ice-cold water. 9 years of marriage, plans for the future, and the dreams of having kids once the mortgage was settled, all left hanging in the balance. I felt blindsided, betrayed by Jennifer after everything we had been through. I needed answers, so that night, I sat in the living room waiting for her return. It took a few hours into the dark of the night for her to walk through the door. She seemed surprised to find me awake, a departure from my usual sound asleep state. Looking back, I should have seen it as a red flag, but hindsight, as they say, is 20/20ths. The weight of the nuclear evidence sat heavy in my pocket, but I wanted to hear her out. I asked her point blank, "Why were you working for a swingers club?" She seemed to freeze, attempting to brush off my question with confusion. "Babe, you must be confused. I don't work at any such place. What makes you say this? Where is this coming from? What makes you jump to such conclusions?" she said, giving me the look as if I were the crazy one. I felt a rush of anger but managed to keep my cool. I insisted she come clean. Jennifer kept denying and continued to act as if I were making baseless accusations. That's when I brought out the pictures, laying them out one by one. I watched her face closely, and with each glance, the color seemed to drain from her face. The guilt radiated from her like heat from a furnace. Any slight doubt I might have had about the photos being hers vanished. Instead of more lies or a defensive outburst, she broke down sobbing. She claimed it was all for the mortgage, to save our home, all for us. She expressed shame for what she had become and how she had kept it hidden to protect me. My betrayal radar was beeping louder than ever. I pointed out that her fear of my disappointment didn't give her the right to stab me in the back. Her apology felt like a band-aid on a broken bone. She tried to reason that she never meant to hurt me and didn't want me to find out. I questioned her future plans. I had secured a new job a few months ago, and she could have quit. We could have handled the mortgage without her nighttime escapades. She seemed at a loss for words, and frankly, I didn't need to hear any more. Suddenly, everything began to click into place: the designer labels, the expensive decor, her $1,000 clothes. How could I have been so blind? The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. Jennifer was no longer the humble actress. She had become a highly paid symbol of adult entertainment. The air hung heavy with the last unspoken question. Did she enjoy it all, the money, the fame, everything that came with her new career? She remained silent, and the weight of that silence stretched for miles in my mind. Finally, she asked, "What do you want me to do? You want me to quit?" At that moment, I was fighting back tears, grappling with the shattered pieces of my trust. We stood there in silence, like two statues in a crumbling monument of marriage, hoping for a miracle. My life felt like a cheesy joke. Then she broke the silence, pleading for a second chance and vowing to quit the next day. I wish I could have remained cold and kicked her out, but the truth is I couldn't bring myself to utter the word divorce. The roots of who I am, who we are together, felt too entrenched. Instead, against my better judgment, I found myself saying, okay. I gave her a second chance. The next day, against her wishes, I accompanied her to the club to confirm she was really quitting. In front of me, my wife squared things off with her boss, and my fist clenched at the sight of his self-satisfied smirk. After this emotional ordeal, we left together. I decided to take a week off from work to reconnect with my wife, attempting to revisit our days as love-struck teenagers, sweet nothings, silly pranks, and laughter. It felt nostalgic, and for a moment, I truly believed we could salvage our relationship. As bizarre as it sounded, my wife's previous job at the swingers club had saved our house, a hard pill for me as the so-called breadwinner. But she quit right before my eyes, and we now had more time for each other. Another week rolled by, and she began applying for new jobs around. The same time, my law firm assigned me to handle a $1 million lawsuit requiring travel to Indiana. The thought of going long distance again made me apprehensive. However, my wife's assurances gave me the courage to accept the job. We bid each other a passionate farewell at the airport filled with promises, hugs, and kisses. As I left, I felt a mix of excitement for my new role and anxiety over trusting Jennifer again. So here I was, trying to trust my wife to remain faithful while I was away or in the marriage. I chose trust. You might judge me for it either way. Just when things were looking up, Murphy's Law struck again. The universe decided to test me further, revealing that I had been weak, showing I wasn't ready to be strong. My cheesy life had to shift gears for me to learn. The first few weeks of the new job were promising. I was defending young teens on the brink of juvenile detention, rewarding work that I had been seeking. Despite the workload, I made sure to ring up my wife every evening. However, after a few weeks, I noticed a shift. Sometimes she wouldn't be available or wouldn't answer at all. She had her reasons, of course, the job hunt, errands to run, which I swallowed hook, line, and sinker. Then came a cryptic text message at work one day. It was from the anonymous angel who had first alerted me to Jennifer's secret life. The message brought back a wave of unease, and my heart began pounding again. I quickly shot off a reply and set up a meeting at a local restaurant the following Tuesday. The week couldn't have gone slower, but Tuesday finally rolled around. I wrapped up work by 5 p.m. and drove to the restaurant. I got there a bit early, ordered the first thing I saw on the menu, and settled into my seat. Not that I was interested in the food. My attention was entirely on the mystery guest who was about to turn my life upside down again. Just after 6 p.m., an elegant woman walked through the restaurant doors. Instinctively, I knew she was the one I was expecting. As she approached my table, she introduced herself. "My name's Nancy, and you're Jessica's husband, right?" "Yes," I responded, my curiosity piqued. "How did you get those pictures?" She let out a heavy sigh before answering. "We worked at the same club." "I quit." Nancy paused, looking at me carefully before elaborating. "I should have come forward sooner, but I feared losing my job. Now that I've left that dreadful place, I think it's time you heard the full story." A whirlwind of emotions gripped me: nervousness, excitement, uncertainty. What was I about to uncover about my wife? "Go on," I said, leaning forward in anticipation. Nancy exhaled and began. "Jessica and I were co-workers. We shared the same shift and often spent our breaks together. I had been there for 3 years before she showed up. I helped her settle in, unaware that she was hiding her marital status. Every time I asked her if this was the job she really wanted, she confidently replied yes, and I believed her. At first, she would clock out promptly after her shift, heading straight home. But over time, I noticed changes. She began spending more time with the patrons and staff. Our club attracted many actors, and Jessica seemed to bond especially well with them. She also started showing up at work in increasingly lavish outfits. This wasn't unusual for the job, but Jessica was going all out. Nancy then shared how one night Jessica invited her to a nightclub after work. They both ended up pretty drunk, though Nancy drank less as she had to work the next morning. Nancy, taking responsibility for Jessica's state, booked an Uber and decided to see her home. On our ride back, Jessica asked me why I worked at the club. I told her the truth, the need for money and my failed attempt at landing a job elsewhere. When I asked her the same, she initially said it was to pay her mortgage, but then she admitted that she now worked there because she liked the luxury the job afforded her. Nancy then dropped a nuclear bombshell, even bigger than all mentioned before. Jessica, in her drunken state, must have been in the know. "So, I took those secret photos to alert you. Using social media, I found your workplace, left the envelope in your cubicle, and hoped for the best. I was stunned, my mind replaying the night I had confronted my wife. You started for us, but you kept going for you, I told her. My gut instinct was right, and I regretted not trusting it. Nancy, noticing my silence, waited for me to respond. I thanked her for her honesty and revealed my decision to file for divorce. With that, Nancy left the restaurant, but something still felt off. As I was preparing to file for divorce, I received a shocking letter. The hits kept on coming. Jessica had beaten me to it, accusing me of abuse, mistreatment, and even infidelity. The absurd accusations were backed by a photo of Nancy and me at the restaurant. Suddenly, it dawned on me, Jessica had been spying on me. Overwhelmed by rage and anxiety, I realized I had to stay composed. Despite the damning evidence and my wife's public slander on social media, I knew the accusations were baseless. My first step was to rehire the same private investigator. Armed with a trove of evidence against my deceitful wife, I was ready to fight back. Jessica may have made the first move against me, but I was determined to make her regret it. I compiled all the information from the private investigator and stored backups on my phone and computer. Next, I messaged Nancy, asking if she'd testify for me at the divorce hearing, as my wife had snapped a picture of our conversation and was accusing me of infidelity and worse. Nancy's reply came after a full day. Yes, just let me know when. I texted back, informing her that the hearing was set for next month. I spent the night organizing everything and preparing myself for the final battle against my wife's deceitful games. Fast forward a month, the day of the divorce hearing finally arrived. I picked up Nancy, and we drove to the courthouse in Virginia. I had her take a seat early in the courtroom. I wanted my wife to remain unaware of Nancy's presence until it was time for her to testify. After all, if my wife could blindside me with more lies, I was justified in surprising her with the truth. I met with my attorney, who arrived 15 minutes after Nancy and I. My wife made her entrance 45 minutes later, accompanied by her extended family, a well-dressed man I assumed was her attorney, and a young girl who bore a resemblance to my wife. A few minutes later, the judge entered, and the hearing began. The opening statement by my wife's attorney was shocking. He accused me of the very infidelity that I had accused my wife of. He claimed I forced her to quit her job, refused to help her find new employment, and made false accusations against her when I found a better-paying job. To top it all off, he argued that I wished to deny her alimony, leaving her penniless. The worst allegation came next, and I couldn't have made this stuff up in my wildest dreams. Apparently, I was refusing to provide any support for our supposed daughter who needed financial aid. He requested the court to compel me to make alimony payments to my wife following the divorce. I was stunned. My wife had never mentioned having a daughter, and neither had her family. We had never planned on having children, yet alone an 11 or 12-year-old girl. As I tried to make sense of the revelations, I remembered a puzzling reaction my wife had had to a question in high school. It dawned on me then, she must have dropped out to hide a pregnancy. All these years, I believed we had no secrets, yet she had kept this enormous one hidden in plain sight. I had no time to dwell on this startling revelation, however. The divorce hearing was well underway. My God, this hit me hard, but I couldn't have a soft spot anymore and be weak. I had to fight for my life right now. So then, it was our turn, and the fight was on. My attorney cleared his throat before addressing the judge. Your Honor, they've misrepresented my client at every turn. Not a single instance of infidelity on his part can be substantiated. The photographs and questions presented are insufficient to prove such a claim. Moreover, we have solid evidence that it's his spouse who's been involved in rampant infidelity. Please refer to Exhibits A, B, and C, which show the defense's client openly confessing to deceitful behavior for financial gain. These actions don't speak to the character of a trustworthy person, especially one who misrepresents our actions and those of my client. Furthermore, we can attest to the claim that the defense requires financial support, as Exhibit D shows she is currently employed and fully capable of supporting herself. Any contrary assertions are misleading. If her counsel disagrees, we challenge them to provide bank records to prove their case. My attorney paused before concluding, my client has been deceived and misled, and now he wishes to disentangle himself from this web of lies without financial loss. We believe the court will find this to be a reasonable request. The judge took a moment to deliberate, then proceeded to review the evidence. The last exhibit, Exhibit D, had been meticulously collected by my private investigator. It was undeniable proof that my wife was still employed, and as the evidence was shown to the courtroom, her face paled. The photographs clearly displayed her working at a swingers club just a week ago and flaunting expensive attire and jewelry. Her lawyer seemed perplexed while her family appeared shocked. I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph as her dirty web of deceit unraveled in front of everyone. During this whole ordeal, I was alone and receiving the hits, and the hits just kept on coming. Sure, I shared the blame when I gave her another chance and chose the weak route, but now I had no remorse, and it was my turn to deal the hits. Enter the last nuclear hit when my lawyer called Nancy to the witness stand. As Nancy rose, my wife turned an even paler shade of white, and I couldn't suppress my smile. Under my lawyer's questioning, Nancy confirmed her identity, acknowledged her past employment at the same club as Jennifer, my precious wife, and shared her perceptions about her. Nancy disclosed how Jennifer flaunted her wealth and confessed about lying to her husband while in a drunken state. When my lawyer asked Nancy about a photograph featuring her and me, she explained that she had approached me to inform about Jennifer's infidelity and had nothing to fear as she had quit her job at the club. She clarified that the photograph was not evidence of any infidelity on my part, and to further cement this, she produced an audio recording of our conversation. As the recording played, my wife's face fell. She must have assumed I had nothing recorded, and if I hadn't, perhaps I would have lost to her deceit. However, the truth was laid bare for all to see, and there was nothing left to shield her. After the recording was submitted to evidence, the judge turned to my wife and her attorney with a stern expression. Both sides have presented their cases and arguments regarding alimony. If there are any additional statements you would like to include, please do so before I render my decision. I expected an outburst from my wife, but she remained silent, her face buried in her hands. Her family and even her attorney looked at her with disappointment and disgust. The courtroom fell into silence before the judge spoke again. In the case of alimony provision, I determined that the plaintiff lacks grounds to demand alimony. The petition for divorce is granted, and just like that, I was divorced and a free man. I walked out of that courtroom smiling like a kid who just swiped the last candy from the store. Never spoke or saw Jennifer again. The moment was bittersweet. No, who am I kidding? It was just sweet. The only bitter part was the realization that I'd spent so much time on a person like her. As for my private investigator, well, he saved me. He dug me out of an avalanche of lies and deceit, saving more than just my wallet. If there was a Nobel Prize for saving gullible husbands, he's the winner. This one is for him.
Dear listener,
Thank you
if
for
you
listening.
have reached this far, please click on the subscribe button. It will be a great help.